Hello and welcome to the Women in Conservation podcast. My name is Sofia. Today I'm going to be in conversation with Dr. Alfredo Gimenez-Cassina about his career in scientific communication and journalism. Dr. Alfredo is a biochemist and molecular biologist and has a PhD in neuroscience. Currently, he is the senior editor at Nature Metabolism magazine, which might be familiar to our listeners as the world's leading science journal. So, Alfredo, how would you describe your current role as senior editor?
Hi, Sofia. Thank you very much for having me here. Well, as a scientific editor, basically what we do is we assess scientific papers, manuscripts from all over the world. In my particular case, in the field of metabolism, as this is the scope of the journal, but these can be very broad. So it can be very exciting in the sense that one day you can be handling manuscripts on cancer, another day on neuroscience, microbial metabolism, immunometabolism, etc. And also diabetes, obesity, cardiometabolic disease, I mean, you name it. So basically what I do on a daily basis is that I get to read a lot of different manuscripts on different fields and assess the overall level of conceptual advance, impact for the field, whether they address a long-standing question or not, whether they propose a completely novel and previously unappreciated finding in all types of fields related to metabolism, of course. And then we engage with experts all over the world so that they can evaluate, because in our case, being a scientific journal, our primary goal or our primary target audience is researchers from all over the world. So it's a very specialized audience, and therefore, I mean, you know that scientific journals have very, very specialized articles and very detailed in terms of methodologies and approaches and experimental support of their claims. So this is what I do. I mean, we are called editors, but in a way we are kind of scientific consultants because we are not editing text as such, but we are rather engaging conversation and in communication with scientists all over the world, both researchers who are submitting their work and other researchers that act as external peer reviewers to evaluate the advance, the technical robustness of the findings, etc. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, perfectly.
Good.
So, could you tell us something about any current projects that you have? Just no specifics, just what sort of things do you get to see as an editor?
Yeah, well, I mean, unfortunately I cannot talk specifically about the papers that we're handling because we're bound by confidentiality. But I can tell you, for example, that I have some very exciting papers related to the metabolic basis of metastases, like how the different metabolic aspects of different sites in the body can affect the migration of tumor cells to different sites, and why, for example, lung cancer cells usually metastasize in the brain, or why breast cancer cells metastasize in the bone, things like that. I mean, understanding the metabolic underpinnings. But this is one of the aspects. We also have very, very exciting projects about, well, CAR T cells, for example, that that now they are at the forefront of immunotherapy for many diseases, but mostly cancer right now. So also how to tweak them, how to tweak T cells even further to improve their efficiency. I mean, and this is something, for example, in terms of what we have in terms of manuscripts. But as scientific editors, we also attend a lot of conferences, which is quite interesting because when I was a researcher, I was always attending conferences that were relevant for my field, and now I tend to branch out a lot, which is exhausting sometimes for the brain, but at the same time it can be very cool because one day you're in a cancer conference and another day you're in a neuroscience conference. And we attend conferences, but we also organize conferences sometimes. So for example, a few months ago, I co-organized together with two other colleagues from two different journals a conference on immunity and metabolism in China, which was really exciting because we brought different researchers from all over the world, and I got to go to China, which I had never been. So that was a plus. And now I'm in conversations to organize other conferences in other fields like brain metabolism and things like that. So, which is also very exciting for me because this is my background as a researcher. So it's a topic very close to my heart, basically. So yeah, I mean, we spend the majority of our time reading manuscripts, but at the same time, we get to organize also different special events or special projects, which can also be very fun.
Super interesting.
Mhm.
So you've already spoken a little bit about this, but what is your favorite thing about your job?
Well, I mean, my favorite thing is when you see a manuscript from the very, very beginning, and I mean, some manuscripts I love them from the start because they're very, very close to what I used to do before, and therefore, it's great for me to see them go forward and progress and evolve over time. And you engage with the authors, and then try to help shape the manuscript and try to find a path forward. Because sometimes it's like, yeah, this is really good, but you need the extra mile to complete it. And then when you can help out, I mean, to be honest, some people always give us a lot of credit and everything. To be honest, for me, all the credit goes to the researchers. They are the ones coming up with amazing ideas. They are the ones doing all the job, and that is amazing. And it's a lot of work. I've done it before as a researcher myself for many years. So I definitely value all those efforts. But it's really, really rewarding when you can help out. And above all, when it's a manuscript that is very, very close to your heart like that. But at the same time, it can also be very exciting. For example, I handled once a manuscript on cyanobacteria and photosynthesis, and how the adaptation to the light and dark cycles could affect the survival of these organisms, which basically produce a significant amount of oxygen. So without those organisms, we wouldn't be here. And the fact that I get to read these papers, I mean, it's something that as a researcher, probably I would have seen the headline and then thinking, okay, that sounds interesting, but that's it. And now I get to learn a lot about this completely, uh, you know, topics that are completely out there for me. So I think that's really exciting. Yeah.
Yes, I mean it sounds amazing being able to
Yeah.
talk to all these researchers.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
so I know you've spoken about how you used to do research in
Mhm.
neuroscience. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Like sort of what things that you did, what's it like being a researcher, anything
Mhm.
you
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I was. I mean, I'm kind of a late bloomer as an editor because most people become editors right after the PhD or after some research experience, like what is called postdoctoral experience after your PhD. In my case, I started already quite late in life as an editor, but I think it doesn't have to be necessarily a bad thing. Yes, I started my research career in Spain. Where I'm originally from. I did my PhD in Madrid, and I was working in neurogeneration and how, I mean, trying to find protective strategies by gene therapy. So basically using genetically modified viruses with neuroprotective genes and trying to tweak or to counteract neurodegenerative insults. And at the time, we were using models of mitochondrial dysfunction because, well, as you know, mitochondria are very important for, cellular energy and many other functions as well, and they are particularly important in neurons. So we were trying to counteract it. And at some point, I became more interested in what happens to mitochondria in neurons when they're still alive and they have committed to die. But like, what happens in healthy neurons? And well, I did my PhD part in Spain and also in the UK, and that also gave me a flavor of like, do I want to try different things, different labs, different experiences? And the answer was definitely yes. That was an eye opener. So this is when I went to the US and I spent 6 years working on what happens in neurons when they're alive and they have to make metabolic decisions, and what does it mean for their function. And this is how, with that in mind, this is how after I completed my postdoctoral training, which is, this transition between your PhD and the next step in your career, above all, if you're willing to pursue an academic career, where I started my own group, my own research group on that particular topic, on how uh, metabolic networks in the brain, these things that everybody studying biochemistry always hates, like the Krebs cycle or glycolysis or things like that. I loved it. I always did. Maybe I'm a bit of a nerd, but I always really like these aspects of biochemistry. So this is when I decided to start my own group. So I moved back to Europe. I went to Sweden first, and then eventually got a position back in Spain. So I continued doing that. Um, Life as a researcher, it was a lot of fun at the very beginning for me. I really enjoyed it. I have no regrets whatsoever. But after 20 years, to be honest, I stopped being excited about the everyday life of a researcher because, I mean, you need a lot of perseverance and patience, and that's great. And I think of myself as a reasonably patient person, but at some point I lost the excitement. I mean, I just imagine in the way I compare it, it's usually like I imagine that you love food, but you don't like cooking. You just enjoy the end product, but you don't like the process of getting there. So at some point, I felt like that. For a while, I really, truly enjoyed going to the lab and thinking of the next question and thinking of the next experiment and the excitement of getting a result and things like that. And that was great for a few years. But at some point, I lost excitement for it. And I realized that I really enjoyed reading, studying, learning new things, and reading in different fields and everything. So I decided I started to think of what could be the best professional option for me. And well, this was a very good fit. There are many things that you lose as an editor, meaning you lose the daily touch with the lab. So there are many details that I might not be super familiar with anymore, of all technical details or how this particular process operates. And I mean, and then I admire people when I see the reports from other researchers saying, "Oh, but we know this, and this is well known in the field and whatnot," because I don't have all these details. However, I take a step back and I have a very big picture now of many different fields, which is also very rewarding in different ways. I mean, I get to read on fields that I would have never read before. So I think it felt like a natural transition in a way. I mean, it sounded a bit traumatic when I left, when I closed down the lab in Spain and then moved to Germany to take this new job. Also because at the time I had already a permanent position, like a tenured position at Spanish University, which felt like the holy grail of research. Like you are done, like you have a salary for life, now you can focus on the research. And then this is when I quit. But but well, it felt like a natural move for me. So and I haven't looked back, to be honest.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, it totally makes sense that I guess as a researcher, you kind of don't get to see the big picture because you're always specializing. So I guess as an editor, it allows you to sort of explore a little bit of everything. And yeah, as you said, you just have a love for science. So that's amazing. So, so are you saying, would you say that your career in research allowed you to then be a good editor? Would you recommend that people spend some time if they want to get into being an editor to do some research? Do you think it was useful for you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you really need research experience to become an editor because at least in journals where you have full-time editors, I mean, there are different types of journals, and some of them are society journals that you have academic editors that are people who have their own labs and their own research, and then they do some editorial work on the side, which, to be honest, it's not to be underestimated because it's a lot of work on both fronts. But then there are journals like, for example, like nature journals or cell journals or science, or I mean, like some of these big journals that have full-time professional editors. All these editors, they need to have a PhD because you really need to have a research experience. And I think it's important because this way, first of all, you are much more exposed to the science, and also you have an understanding of what it means. Like when you are asking for a revision or when you're asking for certain things, I mean, you need to have an understanding of what you're doing, of what you're assessing, and a real understanding, a hands-on experience on this. Now, some people have postdoctoral experience, which I think it's very helpful because it broadens expands your views, your perspective, your horizons. That said, many people do it without having postdoctoral experience. They go straight into editorial, and they're amazing editors. They're super insightful people, and they had an amazing understanding of what this means, and they're really, really good. I don't think that I would have been a good editor myself right after my PhD. But what I would recommend, regardless, is that no matter when you make a career transition, whether it's from academia to editorial or industry or whatever, rather than thinking, I mean, and I get this question a lot, like, don't you regret not doing this sooner? Like, I don't. I mean, it's all, learn from your experience and value the experience that you got. I mean, I think I have a unique experience of having been a researcher for 20 years before I became an editor, and that also gives me, a different perspective on things, and even literature from 20 years ago, that or topics that were fashionable 20 years ago, and how things have moved and whatnot. That gives you a perspective that I think it's actually very interesting, and I want to think very enriching. I don't know if my authors will agree with me, but but I
Yeah.
mean, for me, the punchline is whichever path you choose, make the most of it, and instead of lamenting not having moved on before, just value the experience that you acquire along the way, because I think it's valuable no matter what.
Yes, definitely. You spoke before about how you didn't think that you would have been a good editor, like coming out of your PhD. What personal sort of qualities do you think someone needs to be a good editor?
I mean, well, you definitely need to have critical thinking. I mean, to be able to go into details, but at the same time, to step back and have a big picture of things, and read carefully and put everything in context, see what it means. And I felt that I was a very slow learner at the time. Well, and now I still take my time to make my decisions, and I think it's worth taking your time to make your decisions. But now I need to have very good time management skills, because I keep getting papers every day. So, and if one day I decide to be slower, then well, the day after I need to catch up. So, but yeah, I mean, you need to have this kind of like very critical thinking, very broad way or of seeing things, very broad perspective on things, but attention to detail at the same time. You have to be insightful, but at the same time, I think you have to be empathetic, because in the end, these are important decisions, above all when you're in a high profile journal, and they can have an impact on people's careers and people's ways of doing things. But at the same time, you need to be firm. I mean, I am the first one who wants to publish really good papers, but at the same time, I need to make sure that they are really good and they're solid and they're robust and they're trustworthy. And therefore, you need to be to have a very good balance between being firm, but at the same time being understanding and listening, and being able to and willing to listen to all arguments in a reasonable way. And I mean, you also have to be very good at communicating, with some decisions are really hard. Some
Yeah.
decisions, I mean, after you have a paper that people have been working on for, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, I was a postdoc for 6 years in Boston, and my first paper came out 5 years after I joined the lab, and the second one 6 years after I joined the lab, or yeah, something like that. So these things, you cannot take them lightly, and but at the same time, you need, sometimes after that, you have the paper in revision for yet another year, and then the paper is rejected. So you need to be very tactful and very understanding, and try to find a path forward somehow with another journal if possible, and things like that. So there are many things that you need to keep in mind. Also, as an editor, I mean, it can be a solitary job. I mean, you do everything, and all the decisions are made as a team, but in the end, you're reading a lot. So that means a lot of time on your own, reading and associated literature, and so you need to have a very good balance of knowing that you're going to be on your own for a long time, but at the same time, you go out on a conference and you cannot hide under a rock, because you are there to do some outreach to people. So you need to be a good networker, which is something that didn't come naturally to me. I mean, it still doesn't come naturally to go out and talk to strangers about their work and reach out to them and tell them that I would love to hear more, but at the same time, without making promises. So you have to be very careful. So you need to have some social skills, and those, I can tell you, you can develop them. I mean, now at my age, I can do that. But when I started, I mean, if I went to a conference as a PhD student all by myself, I would be really hiding under a rock and just listening to talks and pretending I'm invisible. I mean, not even standing by my own poster or anything, just trying to hide and being noticed by everyone. And
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think you've covered everything. I mean, it sounds really interesting. So, what would you say for you is sort of the most unexpected thing, or something that people don't really think of when they think of the job that editors do? Is it anything that you think is very unique that people don't really think of?
I mean, in terms of very unique, the possibility of seeing, I mean, just imagine papers that come out in the news or something, and all the papers that make it to the press. But even as a researcher, if you are more into the field, and then it's like, oh, this was a great paper, there was a major breakthrough in the field, even if it doesn't make it to the news. Uh, but um, but you have seen that paper like a year ago, and you have seen it developed, and I mean that's pretty cool. Like you see it in the news, and it's like, yeah, this is all news. I mean, this is kind of like a very cool thing. Also, things that people don't think about is that, I mean, once you're in the field a bit more, then yes, but I didn't think about this before. We travel a lot. I mean, you would say that we are sitting in a library reading stuff, and then that's it. But we're actually traveling to several conferences a year, which is I mean, can be quite nice, but also quite exhausting because you're always working in a conference. You know that people will approach you because they want to pitch a story to you, and it can be very exciting, but that means that they want an answer from you, and that's, I mean, and you cannot make decisions on the spot. I think there's only one time that I said, I cannot guarantee publishing this, but I can offer you to send the paper out to review for sure if you submit to me, because this is very unique. But this is, I mean, you have people pitching you amazing stories. Now, the downside of this is we reject a lot. I mean, just to give you an idea, in these high-profile journals, about 80% of the stuff that we receive does not even go out to review. It's rejected within a week or so without going out to peer review, which is bad. But it's even worse that many papers that go out to review, or many papers that we even invite a revision on, they also get rejected, and that's very bad. I mean, you are the visible face that has to communicate with the authors. And I mean, I know that some people think of us as like I don't know, bots, I guess, or AI doing all the assessment, but we're actually human. And I mean, and of course, the impact of my decision will not affect my life or my career, but I still have feelings, and I still can empathize with or can sympathize also with the authors, and I know that this is bad news, and that's a horrible feeling to have. But well, unfortunately, this is one of the downsides of the job. For me, the worst part of the job is that, I would say, the high amount of rejection. But yeah, what to do?
Yeah, definitely. So would you say then, if you had to think back to like one specific paper that you were like, this is very big in their field and that you can think of now, is there anything that you can think of like a highlight in your experience as an editor
Oh, like some papers that I have handled that were,
that you thought were
yeah.
extraordinary?
But you mean papers that we have published, or papers that didn't make it but were published somewhere else, or both?
Or both, you pick, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's funny that I mean, the thing is, maybe I'm asking this because well, but in particular this week we're having strategy meeting that we have once a year in the journal, in which we do this kind of analysis, like papers that we rejected, where they ended up and whatnot. And I have seen a couple of papers that I was very sad to see go, because some reviewers were not very positive about it. But I have seen that they have been published in very good journals, and they are getting a lot of well-deserved attention, as I think. So I was very happy for them. And honestly, I mean, I was sad that I could not publish them, but I was happy for them. Also, I mean, there are some papers that I'm super fond of, that I really, really liked and enjoyed. And it was a pleasure to handle them, and it was a pleasure to see them published. But rather than a single paper, I would focus on like some fields that I've been kind of curating, that have been very, for example, now it's I don't know if you're aware that now there are many, I mean, many of these omics technologies that allow for like a high throughput analysis of different samples in different ways and whatnot. So spatial biology has become a thing. Like you take a full tissue, and instead of like putting it together like a lysate in a tube and then analyzing the content of that tube, you actually analyze the section of the tissue, of the tumor or something, at the single cell level. So you can have a full picture of gene expression, protein levels, metabolites, etc., in a section of a tissue. And this has become a thing also in metabolism, looking at specific molecules like metabolites and different chemicals inside the cell. This is like a really at the forefront of biology. And we at the journal have been super, super productive in that area. So for me, it's kind of like something that I'm kind of proud of, because this is a field that I've been handling in the journal, and now I even have authors that already come to me saying, "Hey, I would like for you to handle my paper because I have seen that you are the handling editor of this topic, and I would like you to take care of my paper." And when you hear things like that, I was like, well, we are getting attention and we are getting recognition as a journal. I mean, of course, for me, it's great if people want to trust me with or entrust me with their work. But above all, as a journal, thinking, okay, we're doing something good in the sense that uh, people are recognizing that we actually care about this, and we are reflecting what the researchers care about, which is basically the whole point of this job.
Yeah, yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds super interesting. So, just to finish off, now that
Yeah.
you've given us such a picture of your job, do you have any final advice for people that would want to get into science communication or research? Anything that you think? Any
Mhm.
final advice?
Well, my advice, I mean, first of all, you really need to like reading, and I would recommend that you start reading broadly. I mean, even if you're doing already research projects, that you start reading broadly to see if you would actually like this kind of job, because you would be reading very broadly in any journal. I mean, even the ones with a more limited or restricted scope, or more specialized, I don't want to say limited, but more specialized scope, you will still have to read a lot on different fields. But above all, one thing that I would recommend, and this is not only for editorial, but for any kind of career pathway, and nowadays it's much, much easier than 20 years ago. Reach out to people. Reach out. I mean, just look for them. For example, if you want editorial, go to a journal that you like and look at the editorial board and reach out to those people, and then see if they would be willing to chat and share their experience and whatnot. I mean, I've been doing this quite often. I mean, since I was well, again, because I'm older than the average editor, I was teaching at the university, so I've had many of my former students reaching out to me asking if I would mind having a chat about what this job entails or things like that. So because I'm more than happy to share. But the same if you want to go to pharma industry, to academia, to any field really. I think it's always good. You have nothing to lose, and people are willing to share their experience, the pros, the cons of the job, what brought them there, um, you know, uh, tips, tricks of the trade to apply, what the process is like, things like that. So reach out to people. Don't be shy, because I mean, worst case that could happen is that a person that you don't know at all does not reply to an email. That's the really worst thing that could happen. It sounds intimidating when you are the one writing that email, but in reality, the worst thing that could happen is that a person does not reply an email. That's all. So you have nothing to lose and you have a lot to gain.
Yeah, no, that's
Mhm.
completely true. Yeah, that's very
Mhm.
good advice. Well, thank you for sharing with us your passionate career.
My
I'm sure it
pleasure.
will inspire many people that are listening to explore a career in research and communications. And thank you to all our listeners. Until next time.
Thank you.